Welcome to Boardroom Broadcasts, speaking with listed companies from around the world. You can stay up to date with all our content by visiting www.boardroombroadcasts.com and clicking on subscribe.
Today's guest is Vanadium Resources CEO Eugene Nel. Eugene is qualified as a metallurgical engineer and started his career in mining production operations in the early 90s. During a 12-year period, he worked as a metallurgical and operations manager at a number of operating mines. For the last 15 years, he has been in a consulting role to the mining industry, assisting companies worldwide to bring their projects into production and assisting with production efficiency improvements. Since December of 2020, he has been appointed as CEO of Vanadium Resources. Eugene, how are you this morning?
Thanks for the intro, and thanks for inviting me to come have a chat to your listeners, Jesse.
So give us an overview of Vanadium Resources.
Vanadium Resources was listed on the ASX in 2018, early 2018, basically as a reverse listing by a company called VanRes in South Africa into Tando Resources at the time. The tag was TNO, with the main project being brought on board at that stage being the Steelpoortdrift project, of which VanRes, the associate company based in South Africa, has got a 74% ownership. Vanadium Resources also has ownership of a project in the Pilbara, a copper lead zinc project, the Quartz Borate project. But that project essentially has been placed on ice, with all our focus currently being on our flagship Steelpoortdrift project. So we've got a presence in Australia, with half the board being based in Australia and our company secretary, and then the rest of the board being situated, plus the mining executive being myself, etc., being situated in South Africa, where our main project is located.
And the reason we're speaking with you today centers around the very positive results of your pre-feasibility studies on this project. Can you take us into that?
I think what one needs to understand about any mining project, and to place the whole pre-feasibility study into context, there are four main pillars on which any decent mining project is based, that has to be in place. The first pillar being you need to have a big enough resource that it makes it economical to mine and gives you enough life. Now, in the sense of the Steelpoortdrift project, we've got in excess of 350 million tons in the measured and indicated categories, JORC compliant. So we've got a life of mine well in excess of 25 years, probably even longer than 100 years. So the first pillar we cover. The second pillar that's important is that the material needs to be easily mined. In the case of Steelpoortdrift, if you can imagine a big slab of mineralized material, 10 to 30 meters wide, sitting just below the surface and slowly tilting, or very gradually tilting towards one end, it's a very easily mineable resource. So that affects, it brings your OPEX and your CAPEX cost significantly down. So we tick the box on that pillar. The fourth pillar is, or the third pillar is that the material needs to be amenable to metallurgical processing. And in the case of Steelpoortdrift, all the metallurgical test work showed that it is easy to mine or easy to process. We can get very high upgrade ratios, some of the highest in the industry. So we've ticked the box metallurgically. Then the fourth element is you actually need to have the grade in the resource. So you need to have the vanadium there. In our case, our in situ grade on the high grade portion is between 1.1 and 1.2% vanadium, which is amongst the highest in the world for in situ grades. And there we've got about 180 million tons of that high grade material. So once again, we tick those four boxes. Now the net effect is, if you've got those four key pillars in place, that's why we've been able to produce an outstanding pre-feasibility study, where we've shown that at a capital cost of $200 million, we can achieve a total project NPV of 1.2 billion at an IRR of 45%. Production cost on the vanadium flake, we will be producing a vanadium flake now greater than 98% purity, is in the region of $3.08 per pound, which is also in the lowest quartile in industry. So with all those factors in place, the PFS highlights that this is a world-class, low-cost, high-volume project with a very, very high degree in confidence that it can succeed.
And some of our audience might not be familiar with mining in the South Africa region. As your project is located there, could you give us a bit of an insight on the mining environment down there?
Well, the mining in South Africa as such is a well-established mining environment. In the case of our Steelpoortdrift project, there's 10 to 12 other major mines operations within a 30-kilometer radius, operated by international companies like Glencore, Anglo-American, African Rainbow Minerals, etc. So in the context of operating in South Africa with such a well-established mining environment, it does allow us to operate at a much lower cost than, say, for example, somebody putting up a mine 600 kilometers in the bush in the middle of Africa. The infrastructure is stable. We've got access to power. We've got access to water. We've got access to labor skills in the general area in the region. There's a big mining community available to pull skills from. And then logistics, we situated about 200 kilometers or 2 hours drive from Johannesburg, with more than 90% of our processing plant equipment and material being manufactured in Johannesburg. It does allow us to significantly reduce our capital cost and operating cost. Then on the other side of the spectrum, because mining, South Africa is a mining country. We've been mining in this country for the last 150 years. So legislative-wise, even though there's always bureaucracy when you deal with governments that's all over the world, the government does understand mining, and there are quite a few legislations that's also recently come in that's mining friendly and trying to promote the mining environment. We've got a well-established banking system. We've got no issues around forex controls and the likes, which could always impact on your operating environment. So in that sense, of all the African countries, I would say South Africa is probably the easiest place to do business in terms of mining.
And let's talk about vanadium as a resource itself. What is it? Why is it important? And what's its current demand?
Jesse, vanadium is actually one of the more abundant materials in the world. As far as I remember, it's about the 6th most abundant material or mineral in the world. However, it's not always very commonly found in deposits where it can be mined. Vanadium has got a variety of uses. Up to now, the majority of vanadium has been used in steel making. It's a compound that's added to rebar to increase its tensile strength. And then it's also been used in the aeronautical industry and a wide variety of other chemical industries. Historically, steel making has made up about 90% of the consumption. However, that picture is starting to change. For the last 10 years, the implementation of what's called vanadium redox flow batteries, or VRFBs, has become more prominent. Now, a VRFB is a bulk electrical storage battery that's used very commonly with renewable energy projects. It's the VRFB is the type of battery that it's not limited by cycle times and cycle life, so it's got an unlimited life. It can be charged and discharged at the same time. So it's got a very high application in the renewable energy and bulk energy storage sector. Now, with the green revolution, if we can call it that, with a movement away from fossil fuels, and for the world economy trying to be more environmentally friendly. This market for vanadium redox flow batteries is set to increase exponentially over the next 10 to 15 years. Bloomberg has predicted that the battery market alone will increase by up to 300 to 400% within the next 5 to 6 years. So where we see the steelmaking industry, vanadium is still going to be very important there. But there's a growing secondary market around vanadium redox flow batteries. And all projections are that the market is going to be in a deficit by 2025, because in reality, there hasn't been any new projects coming online within the last 10 years. And there aren't any major new projects due to come online within the next year or two. So the projections are that there will be a major deficit in supply, and that deficit could potentially be significantly higher if the vanadium redox flow battery market grows more than expected. Current projections show 5% growth year on year in vanadium demand. And with some aging infrastructure on existing mines, we do believe there's a major market share that needs to be filled.
And how did you get involved with the company, and who are the other key members that make up your board and executive team?
Myself, as you said in the introduction, has been doing consulting to various industries in the past. And one of those was actually Vanadium Resources. So I managed all their metallurgical test work and all the design work up to the scoping study level in 2020. And there was then the natural progression when our previous managing director resigned, that I got promoted into the chief executive officer role. In terms of the other team members, key team members, Mr. Yuri Wessels, our chairman, he's been involved in the mining industry for about 25 years, heavily involved in the exploration side of things, qualified he's got a legal qualification. However, he's developed quite a few operations, including Bahuba, Goldstone Resources, etc. So he's got a lot of experience in the mining environment and also the legal backing. Then Mr. Nico van der Hoofen, other director, he's also currently chairman on Bahuba Resources, which is an operating chrome mine, not too far from the Steelpoortdrift project. So he's got a good or a very in-depth knowledge of the mining environment and mining operations. Thirdly, we've got Mr. Michael Davey, accounting background and being operational in the financial services sector for the last 10, 15 years. And Mr. John Seganik, who's qualified as a mining engineer, but for the last 20 years, he has been heavily involved with debt structuring, financing, mergers and acquisitions. So if you look at that team, we've got quite a range of expertise, myself being technical, the chairman being legal and developing of projects, and then one director that's very good at structuring, financing, funding, debt funding, and then a lot of accounting experience as well. So a very diverse group of senior management.
And are there any industry or political issues that are affecting the production of vanadium at the moment?
At the moment, it's not affecting the production as much. There are a couple of factors that's affecting the vanadium field or the vanadium market as a whole. COVID-19 has, in a sense, given actually a slightly positive impact to the market. With all the infrastructure development projects that's being mooted, for example, the United States wanting to spend about more than $1 trillion on infrastructure. Now, infrastructure requires steel for construction. So the knock-on effect of the COVID pandemic has been that there's a potential much bigger market being developed for vanadium products. The other impact that has occurred is in China. With China's move towards reducing carbon emissions, they've placed a cap on some of their furnaces. Now, the furnaces in China produce vanadium as a secondary byproduct. And with there being a cap on their production levels, their production of vanadium is starting to be curtailed. And for example, in 2020 was the first year that China became a net importer of vanadium instead of an exporter like historically. So, and finally, if you look at the all the other environmental legislation that's coming in place, the Paris Accords, the agreement that's coming in place around carbon emissions, that has had the impact that the market for vanadium is going to grow significantly going forward. And then finally, maybe one that I can throw in that I noticed a day or two ago is that China has also placed a curb on the reuse of lithium batteries, with lithium being one of the major competitors to vanadium in the market due to safety concerns with lithium being reused. So we believe that might also have a slight impact on the market share of vanadium going forward.
All right. And so what does that mean for the organization and your future growth?
If you look at our future growth, we've just finalized the pre-feasibility study. Short-term goals is to make use of the pre-feasibility study to finalize our maiden ore reserve statement, which should be coming out within the next week or two. In addition, you can imagine with a pre-feasibility study of that magnitude coming out, there is a lot of interest in the market. So we will be engaging any potential funders around going forward into our definitive feasibility study. And we're hoping to commence that definitive feasibility study by next month, with completion early next year. So medium-term goal would then be complete the DFS, make the final investment decision on the project, and start construction on the mine towards the latter half of 2022. If I can look at key milestones would be declaration of the maiden ore reserve. It would be commencement of the definitive feasibility study, and potentially looking at offtake agreements on the back of that, and then final investment decision to construct.
All right. And so before we wrap up for today, then, Eugene, is there anything else that you haven't had a chance to address?
Well, I think it was quite a comprehensive chat that we had, Jesse, so I appreciate that. I think the main thing is that we do realize that vanadium might be one of those dark horses in the renewable metals space. And as people start to understand the vanadium market a little bit better, they would realize that Vanadium Resources is currently sitting on one of the premier deposits in the world, highest grade, biggest volume, easy to mine, and there'll be more eyes coming on us, and we would welcome that. And any other questions that anybody has, we are more than welcome to answer.
Excellent. Well, Eugene, thanks very much for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Jesse.
This has been a production of BoardroomBroadcasts.com, a division of Romulus Rising Proprietary Limited. All rights reserved. You can stay up to date with all our content by visiting www.boardroombroadcasts.com and clicking on subscribe.